Okay, so check this out. I've got Good Deal box in the top there, and I've got a few records. I have the Incredible box and the Extraordinary box, and I have different selections in each of those from my in and out list boxes. So I can choose onesies and twosies here. I can, select light toffee and scroll down and say I also want to have red and spicy on this in this box of candies, or purple fizzers or whatever, and or I can remove things from the list as well, or I can just select everything and throw everything in the box, or I can take everything out of the box. And so that's sort of what we're looking at today. We can scroll through our different boxes. So now I'm on the Extraordinary box 1B, and it has a different selection from the original one, and I can choose an item and throw that in there, and I might need to pick different things from there, and I've now scrolled forward to the Incredible box, and I can throw white chocolate in there, remove dark toffee, and so on and so forth. And that is what we're doing today. I'm your host, Sean MacKenzie. Thanks for joining me once again on my channel on data engineering. In this episode, we go back to our Microsoft Access playlist, and we're going to take a look at how to do in and out list boxes, which are really handy and an alternative way to display when you have one-to-many on a form and you don't want to use a continuous form because you'd like to sort of scroll through a list and hit the next to put that into the selected list, or maybe remove items from the selected list, or put all the items in the selected list. And that's what we're going to take a look at today. Let's get started. Okay guys, so pretty fun topic today. You might remember this infamous candy table that I have here with some other tables that we did with candies, but today we're going to look at just this one table, and we're going to make a couple new tables. You'll notice that this is candy table. It's got candy type, candy name, candy price, and you'll notice there's some duplicates names in the candy name column, but we're going to just throw some A's and B's on those later after we're done here, but don't worry about that for now. We're going to make a couple new tables, so we're going to go to create and then table, and the first table we're going to create is for our candy box. So we're going to make some candy boxes that have different candies in them, and so we'll just build one here. We'll go box ID as an auto number, and we'll put a box code on it and a box name. That should do it for now. For all intents and purposes, this is sort of what we need. And we're going to select that auto number box ID. We're going to throw a primary key on it, and then we'll name it, and we'll call it candy box, and that's going to have our candy boxes in it. And then we'll create another table, and this table is going to have all of the items that are in each box. So that as we have a one-to-many, there's a box, and each box has an ID, and then the box can have many items in it. And so we're going to have a box item ID. We'll put a box ID in there as a foreign key, and we'll put a candy ID in there as another foreign key, and that's going to create that one-to-many, which is super handy. It's actually a many-to-many because one box can have many candies, and a candy can be in many boxes. So we've effectively created a many-to-many here. And so we're going to throw our primary key on that first column, and then we'll save it. We'll call this one candy box items, I guess. And that is going to be all that we need for tables. So very simple. If you guys are working on normalizing and learning how to select many events or many different items in a many-to-many situation, this is one way that you can do it. So there's our candy box table. It's got that box code and box name, and the box ID is auto-generated. We don't have to do anything about that. We're going to do a box ID, a candy ID in our candy box items table, and those are all numeric, but we're going to create the display for the user, which is more descriptive, using a form. And so we'll go ahead and we'll do create, and we'll use form, and I'm going to use the form wizard, and that's going to give us a very simple form. We'll select all of the fields in our candy box table, and we'll select columnar, and we'll just take the default form to work on, and that'll give us our starting point. We'll save it, but we'll call it candy box form, and then we'll be good to go. You can see this is our candy box form here. Those fields are kind of big. I think my default field size is set to 255. That's why it made those giant boxes. And so I'll just resize these a little bit so that it's a bit easier to read. We're not super worried about what we see in the fields for the candy box because we're going to be more focused on our in and out list boxes. I'm not sure if that's the official name for it, but we're going to be creating a couple of those today. So there we go. We've got our box ID, box code, and box name, and we've resized it. And now what we're going to do is I'll close that properties window, and I'm just going to sort of take a look at this form. I think the best place to put these is going to be below our fields here. So you could change the design however you want. I mean, this is the default kind of output from the form wizard, but we'll put those boxes down below here, and so we'll go and first let's create a couple of records here in our box table, just so we have something to look at as we're coding. And so I'll create a 1A box, and I'll create I'll call this one the good deal box, and we'll scroll forward. So I tabbed off the end of that record, and you'll see it went to the second record because that's the default behavior. And I'll in our second record I'll create a 1B, and we'll say that this box name is the extraordinary box, something like that. And so that gives us a couple of records that we can use to attach our, and test our in and out list boxes with, and that's what we're going to do now. So to get our list boxes, what we'll do is we'll go up and go to our controls in our form design ribbon there, and we'll grab a list box to start, and we'll just drop that right onto our form here, and that's going to give us the wizard, and we can cancel out of the wizard because we're gonna custom build this one. So we'll take our list, the label there, and I'll pop that over top of the box, and I'll extend that out, I guess, and we'll call this list, we'll call it the available list, because this is going to be the list of all of the candies that are available to put into any box, and that's what the list will be. And then the other list will be the list of all the ones that are selected for this box. So that means you can have your list open. This is sort of an alternative way of viewing, being able to do that one-to-many selection instead of using a subform or using a continuous record or continuous forms. Sometimes it's nice to have this list, especially when the available list doesn't really change that much, or it's a small list. Then this can be a very nice way of doing things, and you can actually see this style of selection pretty much everywhere. It's even in the wizards in Access. So you'll see I copied and pasted that list box, and I just pasted it, and I changed the label to say selected. So now we have an available and selected, and you'll see now I'm putting a button onto the form, and I just chose a button from the control controls there. And I'm just canceling out of that wizard. We're going to custom build this button too. I'm just going to basically put I'll put a little arrow, the greater than sign, and as an arrow, and we'll do the opposite for the next button just to keep it simple. You can go into the Access interface and you can find some very nice button graphics, so you can try those out as well. And I'm just copying and pasting these buttons so that we have something very quick and easy to start with, because this is kind of a long lesson to begin with. It's going to be a bit longer than our usual ones. And so now you can see we've got essentially at the top the deselect all. Oh, I should move that down. Let's move that down. We should have the select all at the top. So let's do that. Let's grab this one here. That makes more sense. We'll put that one down there. So so that the deselection's all together. So now we've got the select all, which will move everything that's available into the selected. So you'll select everything for that box. All the candies are in that box, that particular box, and then we've got, select one, and then remove one, and then remove all at the bottom. So we're going to go into our property sheet for our list box, and we're going to give it a name. We'll call it LBX available. We'll click on the other list box. We're going to call that one LBX selected, and we'll call this one at the top. This will be CMD remove all, or select all, I should say. So CMD select all, CMD select, and then we'll do CMD remove, and then CMD remove all. So that's what all of those buttons are, and that's going to give a nice, easy to use interface for your users if you have a situation that works well for this kind of arrangement. And so now, just like in my other videos you might have watched, we're going to custom build this list box, the available list box. We're going to say the bound column is 2, so it's going to be the second column, because we're going to give that a 0 width. And so we'll go into the builder, the query builder, and we'll select our candy table, because we're going to be selecting candies, and all we're going to need is the candy name and the ID number, which is an auto number. And those two fields are going to be in the box. The first column will have width in the list box, so you'll see it, but the ID column will be invisible, because we don't want to see that. That's not really something that the users want to see. And then we'll click close on that, and we'll say yes to update the row source. And you can see that row source there. There's our bound column, which is 2. And in our format, we've got one for the column count. You can put both of those columns in. You can put 2 columns, but since the second one is invisible, it's not terribly important here. And I can see the width of the list box is 3.794. So I'll just say 3.7 and 0 for my column widths. And we'll say no for the column heads, and that should do us for creating our list box. And so now if I go and view this, you can see now I've got a list of my candies that I can choose from, although it appears that it is out of order, so we could probably sort that ascending. If we go back to our we'll click on our list box and back to the properties and grab that data. So you can go back into your row source and you can change it if you want to, and that's a nice thing to remember, is that you're not stuck with it. You can say ascending on there, and again you just close it and you click yes to save it, and that'll save that row source for you. And so that will look quite a bit better. Now what we want to do is we can format our selected box in the same way, although we're going to have a little bit different of of a selection in this one, because we want the row source to actually select the assignment item. So the box item ID, we want to have that as the selected item, but we want to show just the candy name. So, you know, toffee is in there, but we want to get the assignment ID because we're going to use that for things like delete and add and stuff like that. And so kind of like in the first list box that we did, the available list box, we did the candy name and ID, but we're not going to use the ID in this one. I'm going to change that here in a minute because I'm going to add another table. So you can do that. You can right click in the gray area and then say add table, and you can see that we have a relationship between candy ID, the ID in the candy table, and candy ID in the candy box items table. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say we want to see only the candy assignments that are in that box, that one box that's on the screen in the form at the moment. And so the way to do that is we're going to use a parameterized query, and we're going to say box ID is the form's candy box, and then the box ID. And you'll notice I can change this ID from the candy table, and now I'm going to grab the box item ID, which is sort of like the candy assignment. And so we're showing the candy name. It looks like it's just the list, like the original list, but we're actually in the background, we're grabbing that box item ID, and we're only showing the ones that are in that box, and that's what that last column is there. And so now if I select from if I look at my form here, you can see I've got some dark chocolate, dark toffee, light toffee, and if I scroll through, I can see my list there, and that's kind of what we want to see as we get set up. Don't mind the duplicate rows there. I'm going to add A, B, and C to those after. I noticed that while I was making this, and those are unique rows with unique IDs behind them, and we'll see that closer to the end there. So the first one that we want to do is we want to be able to assign one item. So we'll start with one item being selected into the box that is on screen. And so we can do that by grabbing our code builder, click on the ellipsis there, grab the code builder and go OK. And that's going to create this subroutine, and this is the code behind for this form. And you'll see that when we clicked the ellipsis and it brought us here, it created the very first of our subroutines that we are going to have for each of those buttons. And so this one creates the first subroutine, and it will essentially move one of the items from the left list box to the right list box. And so what we'll do is, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check to see that there's something selected in the left hand list box, and we'll do that by saying if it's null, the list box available, me exclamation lbx available, then simply give a message saying please make a selection before continuing, and then it'll exit the sub. So where it says exit sub, right after the message box, it'll just stop doing anything further. And so if that happens, then it just exits right out there, and it does not continue to this next step. So we're going to go ahead, and I've created STRSQL just above it there, and as a variable, dim STRSQL as string, and I'm going to fill that with a insert statement. We're going to insert into candy box items. We're going to use box ID and candy ID, and we'll put the values in, and we're going to use expressions here so that this is fully parameterized. We're not going to concatenate any strings here using values or anything in this example. So what we're going to do is we'll put in forms, candy box form, box ID, so it's going to get whatever the current box ID is on the form. It's going to put that in, and then it's going to put in the selected candy, forms, candy box form, LBX available, which is the selected value that we know there's a selected value in there because we checked it up above using our if statement. And so now we can choose do command set warnings equals false, and we'll do command run SQL strSQL, and then we'll set warnings true. That's going to turn off the warning saying, are you sure you want to insert a record? And you could use something like currentdb.execute. A lot of people like to use that form instead. However, it's a bit more tricky to use that when you're putting the parameters in with expressions. And so just be aware of that if you do use currentdb.execute, and then you can try that if you want to. And right after that, we can refresh our list box. So we're going to refresh the selected list box now that we've added an item to it, and we're going to use me exclamation lbx selected dot row source equals me lbx selected dot row source, and that is one of the nicer ways of refreshing a list box. It works in all contexts, unlike refresh. But you can also try using refresh or other methods if you like. This is my preferred way of doing it. So I'll clean that up a little bit. There's our candy box items table with our insert selections that are parameters. And so now we can go ahead and we can try to test our first button, and we'll do that. I'll right click on our candy box form, go to form view, and now I can click on an item in the left and I can add it to the box on the right. Oop, wrong button. There we go. Click on the button on the left, go to the box on the right, and that's exactly what we want to see. But when we go to our second row, or pardon me, our second record, which is box 1B, you'll notice I moved from record 1 to 2 there. You'll see it does not change on the right hand side. And so we need to do that refresh of the list box that we did in our first procedure. We also need to do that in the onCurrent event of the form. And so we'll do that now. So I'm just going to copy that. It's nice and easy. Control C, and now what I can do is I can go to the form. So I'll choose form from our drop down selection up above there, and then it gives me a form load event, but I don't want that one. I want form current, which is going to happen every time that the record changes in the form. So when you go to a new row, or pardon me, a new record, it's going to fire that form current event. So now it's going to refresh that box every time we scroll through. So now you can see if I go back and forth between 1 and 2, it shows the ones I selected for 1, and it drops it for number 2 because I didn't add anything. And so now I can add some different selections to the second record, and I added dark toffee and mint toffee and to that record. Okay, so now we're going to do our second button, which is to remove one item from the list, and we can do that now. And so just like we did before, we'll click on the ellipsis in the onClick event of that button. It's going to give us the cmd remove _ click event that you see at the top. And what we're going to build is very similar to the first function that we created. You'll notice that it does not add them, particularly in the subroutines. It does not add them in any particular sequence, and it does not matter what sequence. So if it had added it after our cmd select click, that's fine. If it adds it before, that's fine. It doesn't really matter inside of the code window here for the code behind of our form. And so what we can do is we can say, again, we'll dim our strSQL as string. We'll add another check. So this time we're going to check that something was selected in the LBX selected list box, because obviously we can't remove anything if they didn't select anything from that list box. And so we're going to say, hey, please select an item to remove before continuing. And with VB information as the style, and then remove as the title of that message box. And then we can set up our SQL just like we did in the previous one, but we're going to have a little bit of a different SQL string this time. We're going to be deleting instead of inserting, and so we need to grab, we're going to grab the selection in LBX selected as our parameter. And so to do a delete string, it's very easy. We can just say delete from candy box items, where box item ID equals forms, candy box form, and then the ID that's selected in LBX selected. And that's why you'll note that the SQL in the LBX selected list box in the row source, you'll notice it was a little bit different from the other list box because we chose the box item ID instead, and that's why in that delete string we're going to grab that box item ID so that we're deleting the assignment of the candy, we're not deleting the candy. And so we'll go ahead and we're going to do the same as we did before. We'll do command set warnings, do command run SQL, and do command set warnings to turn those warnings back on. And then we'll say me LBX selected row source is equal to me LBX selected row source, and that's going to refresh the list, and that should do it for this one. I'll clean it up a little bit here, and you can also add some error trapping on here if you like. I have a video for that. Just to keep it simple today, I have not added any error handling, but you can add error handling to your procedure. If you check the video up above here, it will have error handling in it that you could add to your procedure. So now what I can do is I can click on an item in the right hand side list that's in the candy box, and I can remove individual items, just exactly what we wanted to see. So now we have the ability to add or remove items from the list box, and that's very nice and easy and simple, and users just love this this arrangement. The in and out list boxes, users really like that. It's nice and easy to use. As you can see, it's a nice simple interface. We've got we can add items and remove them, and that is where we want to be with those two buttons. So now what we can do is we can go ahead and we can start taking a look at how to do our next task, which is to add all of the items to the list box or remove all of the items from the selected box. So we're, if we have a candy box with all of the candies in it, that's great, and we can have that, and we can just say select all. Or if we want to remove all of the selections from the candy box, we can do that too. So we're going to click on the ellipsis again and the code builder, and you can see it created the CMD select all _ click event, and we're going to populate that much in the same way that we did the first two. Okay, so just like we did on the other two buttons, we're going to start off, we'll dim that strSQL string that we're going to write out. Now those, you could actually create those as action queries, and then just call the action query. That's another way you could do it, but we're going to go ahead and just put those in our code because it's nice and easy. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove any selections that were in the list box, or any candies that were in the box We're going to remove all those just in case there's like 1 or 2 or 3 in there. We don't want to double assign them. So we're going to delete the ones that are there, and then we're going to assign everything after. That's kind of like the easiest way of doing it. And so now we can just go delete from candy box items, where box ID equals forms, candy box form, and then box ID. And that's going to take the box ID from the currently open form that you have, and that's going to be the box ID that is selected on that form. Now we want to make sure that there's actually a box ID in there, so we're going to jump just above this row. This is a good one, kind of like we did before. We're going to say if is null me box ID, then exit sub. So that means it'll just exit. We're not going to give a warning on this one. It just won't do anything. And so we can just go ahead and go do command set warnings false, and do command run SQL, strsql. That's going to delete it because we know that there is an ID selected. And then we'll do command set warnings true, and then we can go ahead and now we can do an insert statement to insert all of the candies into this new box, or into the box that we have selected. We're going to select all of the candies and put them in there as full selection, I guess you'd call it. So we'll go insert into candy box items. And in this case, we're actually not going to be using any parameters for the candies, because we're just going to select all the available candies in the candy table. But we will be using a parameter for the box ID, because we still need to put the right box in there. So I'm using the ampersand and underscore, and what that allows you to do is it allows you to keep extending your string, but you don't type off the edge of the page. You can sort of move down to the next row. And so what we'll do is we'll do insert into candy box items, and we'll put box ID and candy ID, and then we'll do select forms, candy box form, and box ID is box ID, so that's a parameter. And then we'll do candy ID from candy. So we've created a select statement where we've got, I broke it. There is our double quotes. And so now we can go ahead. So we're selecting the candy ID from candy, which is basically all of the candy IDs. And then we've got the parameter as the box ID. So it's going to have the same number on every row for the box ID. And we can do command set warnings false, do command run SQL, and do command set warnings again like we did before. And then we can refresh our row source just like we did in the other cases, and that's going to be our subroutine. So I'll clean it up a little bit here. And I think that candy ID is actually just ID in the candy table. So candy has an ID for each candy, and then it's used as candy ID in other tables. And so now if I go and I hit the select all, you can see it collects all the it puts all the candies in that in the good deal box there, 1A, and I can remove some items after I selected everything, and that works just great. I can remove a whole bunch, and then I can reselect everything if I want. It's nice and easy. Users really like this one, and so that is how that works. And we can sort of turn our attention now to the remove all subroutine, which is pretty going to sort of round out what we're doing here. And so this time I'll start the subroutine differently. I'm going to grab it straight from the box. So this is an alternate way. It's much faster once you get used to coding. You'll see it auto-created that click event when I selected CMD remove all button from that drop down, and I did not have to go back to the form and choose the ellipsis and the code builder like we did before. This time I just grabbed it from the drop down, and you can see there it says unselect all items. And that's what we want to do, and we can move forward from there. So just like we did on the other events, we're going to do if is null me box ID, then exit sub. So we're going to have a check on this one again. Obviously we can't remove anything if there's no box selected, if it's a new record or not started. Record is not started yet, and so we'll just exit sub, and that makes sure that there's at least there's a selection in the remove all on the form at that time. And so we'll do just like we did before. We'll dim an strSQL as string, and now that we know there is a selection for box ID on this form, we can just do a simple delete from candy box items. That's going to be that table that we've been working with so far, where the the box ID equals, and then we're going to put that expression in again. And so we have a parameterized query once again. So we did not do any dynamic SQL here, which is preferable in almost all cases. It's nicer to use parameters if you can. So we're going to use that parameter forms candy box form box ID, and we'll say do commence at warnings false, just like we did on the other ones. We'll do run SQL and then the same thing to turn the warnings back on, just so we don't get that are you sure you want to delete message. And then we'll refresh it just like we did before. We'll refresh that the LBX selected, and we can move on from there. And I'll just sort of clean this up a little bit here, and then we can go ahead and test it. I'll grab those lines there and just move those in, and that should do it. Hopefully I didn't make any errors in there. We'll check it out and see if I get any errors. So we're deleting from candy box items where box ID is equal to the parameter. Very simple delete statement. So that means all of the assignment IDs where the box ID is equal to that, it is there. So now you can see we can delete everything, we can add everything, and there's our warning. You got to select something before you put it in. So I tried to do it while it was still empty, and it gave me that warning message. And that is exactly what we want to see there. So we can assign everything, we can remove everything, we can assign one here, we can remove some, we can add them, and that's really awesome. And we can remove everything, we can add everything, and that's exactly what we want to see. And this is very nice and handy. You can see I can add everything, I can remove everything, add onesies and twosies as I go, and I can remove all or add all. It's very simple and straightforward. Users really like this form. Now, just to round it out a little bit, you'll notice there's double entries in that form. It's because I have duplicate names in here, even though they are unique rows. So let's go ahead and just fix that. I'm gonna grab that. I guess I'll sort this here. So this is the source table, and what I'm going to do is you'll see there's are the unique IDs. I've sorted it, and we'll just add some A's and B's onto the end of the duplicate ones here, just to make them unique in the list. And then we'll just demonstrate that one more time. I got to get rid of this candy table. I think we've done too many episodes with the candy table. Please let me know in the comment section below if you think this is the end of the candy table. But anyway, I'll go ahead and I'll open that candy box form, And now you can see we've got dark chocolate A, B, and C, and toffee and light toffee, and now we can add or remove. Now those were all done by IDs, and so you'll notice when I changed them in the table, they automatically changed here, and that's the benefit of using IDs for everything in your code or in your table design and everything. I'll make sure to use IDs, because then if the name changes on any particular thing, it doesn't matter. It'll automatically filter through your program. So there's your purple fizzers. We're going to remove that. We'll add everything. We can remove everything if we want, and that makes it very, very handy and nice and easy for our users. And when we scroll between records, now we're looking at the extraordinary box instead of the good deal box. You'll notice that the selections are different, and we can scroll through all of our records, and we can choose and remove different things for each of those. Okay guys, and that is how you can do your in and out list boxes attached to your current record on your form in Microsoft Access. If you guys have any questions or comments, please make sure to put those in the comment section below, and I will respond to those. Play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain, live the grind, I could change, in my mind, pick a lane.